In the final years of the Second World War, Germany placed its hopes on weapons unlike anything built before. They were called Wunderwaffe, wonder weapons, meant to reverse a war that was already being lost. Only two of them were ever used against an enemy, the V-1 flying bomb and the V-2 rocket. This is the story of both. This is the V-1 flying bomb leaving its ramp. A steam-driven piston threw it off 50 meters of steel rail and into the air. Pilotless, cheap to build, simple to operate, and loud. The British called them buzz bombs after the sound of the engine. This is how the Allies usually saw it. A dark shape in a fighter's gun camera, seconds before it was destroyed. Around 10,000 were fired at Britain. But unlike the V-2 that followed, this one could be fought, and often was. This is where it began, a German crew pushing a flying bomb out of its shelter on a trolley towards the launch ramp. 8 meters long, with stubby wings and a steel tube mounted above the tail, a pulse jet that fired 50 times a second and drove it along. Inside, it was simpler than almost any aircraft of the war. A warhead in the nose, then fuel, then bottles of compressed air. No guidance at all. A gyroscope held the course, a propeller counted the distance, and when the count ran out, the engine cut. And this is the ramp, 50 meters of steel rail in a forest clearing, photographed by British troops who captured it near Amiens. It was designed by an engineer named Helmuth Walter. The whole thing could be built in a field in days, and that was the point. A ramp alone was useless. This is a full site in an Allied sketch, control post, stores, and the curved sheds they called ski buildings. By January 1944, Allied intelligence had this, a map of the whole network with almost 100 launch sites plotted along the French coast. Each dot is a site like that. Each triangle is a concrete bunker, and every one of them sits within 150 miles of London. So here is one of those triangles from the air, Siracourt in northern France, photographed while it was still being dug. 200 meters long, 55,000 cubic meters of concrete, built to assemble the missiles, store them, and fire them. But it didn't stay hidden. Allied reconnaissance found it in 1943 and never really stopped watching it. The markings are theirs. The village name, the map reference, the pinpoint number. By now, the site had a file and a permanent target code. Over 1944, more than 2,500 tons of bombs fell here. It took 17 tallboys to finally punch through the roof. Production ended. The bunker never fired a single missile, and it is still standing today in a private field in Picardy. And ground sites weren't the only option. V-1s were also launched from bombers, Heinkel, E-100s and 11s out over the North Sea. So how do you stop it? Britain stacked 3 lines of defense across the south coast. Guns, fighters and balloons. Shooting one down at close range could destroy the fighter too, so some pilots tipped them over with a wingtip instead. Behind the fighters stood the last line, around 2,000 barrage balloons ringing London, each trailing a steel cable. The idea was crude: fly into the cable, lose a wing. Crude, but it worked, about 230 times. And this is what it looked like when all 3 lines failed. A V-1 over the rooftops of London, past the dome and the spires. The engine has already cut out. From here it glides down in silence, and the silence is how people knew to run. Guns, fighters and balloons destroyed around 4,000. Thousands more got through. And this is the hour after one of them landed. Around 20,000 homes were destroyed and hundreds of thousands damaged. This man has just lost his. By autumn 1944, the launch sites in France were overrun. And then came the second weapon, V-2, raised upright on its trailer in minutes. This is what a launch position looked like, a rocket among pine trees, vapor at the base where liquid oxygen boils off. No concrete, no runway, nothing to find from the air, just a clearing, a trailer, and men standing in the grass. So where did they come from? A hillside near Nordhausen with goods wagons running straight in under camouflage netting. This is inside. Finished flying bombs on their cradles, running back into the dark, 1 tunnel out of 47 cut into the rock. Nothing here could be bombed because none of it was above ground. Both weapons were built under this mountain, side by side. And this is who built them. Striped camp uniforms, bent over the skin of a rocket, working under the mountain. The camp at the entrance was called Mittelbau-Dora. Around 60,000 passed through it. They worked and slept underground. This is what the Allies found when they opened it. Around 20,000 of them died here. More people died building these rockets than were ever killed by them. Upright, it stood 14 meters tall and weighed 13 tons, most of it fuel. Alcohol and liquid oxygen in the tanks below. Painted for war, not for testing. And on the wall behind them, an ordinary factory sign, smoking prohibited. And this is what they were for. 13 tons rising off open ground on a column of flame, launched from nothing but a trailer. It climbed to 80 kilometers, the edge of space, then fell back faster than sound. No gun and no fighter could reach it. There was no siren because there was nothing to warn of. The blast came first, and the sound of it arrived afterwards. Police carrying a stretcher at a run past a shattered cart and a shop sign still in place. Everything happened without notice. But some strikes were worse. Around 1,400 hit London, and one of them did this to a block of flats in Whitechapel. 134 people died here, most of them families, many of them refugees who had already fled Europe once. This is what was left of the rocket itself, the combustion chamber lying in the grass where a terrace of houses had stood. A man in a hat and coat bending down to touch it. Everything else in this photograph used to be somebody's home. And London wasn't the only target. Antwerp was hit harder still. This square took a rocket in the middle of the day. The truck is still burning. On the stones in front of it lies a child. No warning was possible. That was the point. Neither weapon changed the outcome of the war. Together they killed around 9,000 people and won nothing at all. They cost far more lives to build than to fire. But the technology itself was worth having, and everyone wanted it. Within days of the camp being opened, American officers were down in the same tunnels, standing over what they had come for. The engine went out of the mountain on a truck. So did the drawings, the parts, and everything else they could carry. This man was handed a piece of a captured V-2 engine in Maryland in 1945. His name was Robert Goddard. He had flown the world's first liquid-fueled rocket in 1926, and the Germans had read his papers. Within a year, the same rocket was standing in a New Mexico desert, surrounded by men in shirt sleeves and a film camera. 60-odd captured V-2s were fired here. No camouflage, no forest, no hurry. The war was over and the research had begun. And the men came too. This is them, surrendering in May 1945. The man with the cigar ran the program. The man in the cast designed the rocket. Within months, they were in the United States under an operation called Paperclip. None of them ever stood trial. His name was Werner von Braun. He designed the V-2 and the tunnels at Dora built it under his program. In America, he built rockets again. 24 years later, one of them carried the first men to the moon. In the next video, we'll continue this and other stories through rare images and first-hand accounts. If you'd like to follow the series and not miss future videos, consider subscribing to the channel. History deserves to be remembered and told carefully.